One of the useful concepts that's being discussed in terms of feedback at the moment is feedback dialogue. And one way of thinking about this is to think of feedback not just as a process that's initiated by comments on students' work, but as part of an ongoing dialogue that occurs between ourselves and our students at every single stage. It begins when we brief them on a task, when we introduce a task, when we have a bit of discussion, when they clarify some aspects of it with us. And what we're doing in that process is starting to engage students in what counts as good, what is worthwhile, what they need to take into account. And that continues all the way through to their preparation for the task, which then leads to other questions, hopefully, to the task itself. There are then particular comments on that. Then following up from that, then there's subsequent action. And part of the action may be they come back to us and say, well, what do you mean by that? What's the implication of that? What can I do about that? So feedback is part of this continuing dialogue we're having with our students in various ways. Some of it's verbal, some of it's written, some of it's in other media. But what this is leading to is this better and better understanding by students about what's worthwhile, what counts as good, what do I need to be attaining. And it's a discussion about standards and not just about a particular piece of writing at a particular time. So where do students fit into feedback? I think we need to start by not treating them as passive. That we don't just set them an assignment and tell them what they've got wrong. Right? All this is doing is it's pushing students back. So how can we draw students in? And we draw students in by giving them an active role. And a part of that active role is them thinking about what constitutes good work whilst they're preparing it. And our very, very good students have got a pretty good idea about this. And one of the things they're doing is they're starting to kind of identify the appropriate standards and criteria, as soon as they see what the nature of the task is. But for our other students, we need to start to scaffold them into that and to explain to them about some of the things they need to be considering. And to think about the role of other people in that, so that we're helping students make judgments about their own work, but part of that is in the context of having a dialogue not just with ourselves, but with other students. So sometimes that occurs informally, but unfortunately nowadays there's much less informal discussion about students' work than there used to be when they were, more together and as a cohort. So we need to think about what the role is of students making comments to each other. We need to think about where students fit in themselves. And we need to devise a range of activities which sit alongside the formal acts of assessment that start to build students' capacity to make these judgments. And it doesn't build their capacity to make judgments by giving them a handout which says, these are the standards, these are the criteria, this is what you've got to meet. Because if they could appreciate that, they wouldn't need to take our subject. So because they're taking our subject, it means they don't have an appreciation of the standards and criteria and how to interpret them and how to apply them to their work. So whilst we think we're being transparent, and we are at one level, it's not necessarily very effective pedagogically to just give them the information. They've got to know how to read it. They've got to know how to make sense of it. They've got to know how to interpret that in the context of the particular work that they're doing themselves.